Muggles? This is Fyrebyrd, and I'm here with Ridgeback.
Hello!
And you're listening to The Dusty Cauldron, where we talk about all things Harry Potter and the witchy world at large. Today is a deep dive episode, and our deep dive is going to focus on runes in Harry Potter. And now, there are a lot of different runic systems. From the one and only actual canon reference that we get to runes, it's a reference to the Elder Futhark runes. So we're going to stay within just the Elder Futhark runes for this episode. But to give you like an idea of how like ancient runes that would be, Old Norse is written in Young Futhark. And Old Norse is very, very old. And so the Elder Futhark is even older than that.
So wait, so the actual Harry Potter runes are written in Elder Futhark?
Futhark. Yeah.
So, and it actually exists in the modern world?
Yeah.
Wow, where did they find that information?
That's
awesome.
Internet. Yeah.
That's
like, I mean,
awesome.
you can find it on Google. And I think that the creators, like, understanding of runes is probably pretty loose. Like, it probably came from a Google search because we'll get into it, but it's not used correctly. But I don't think that's from ill intent. I think it's because, like, they can be very confusing. Like, it's essentially a different language, right?
Right.
But so the course that's being taught is ancient runes. And, like, I guess before really digging into runes at all, I was thinking it was like lots and lots of different runes and stuff like that. And then based off of the only actual canon reference we have, I truly think that the ancient runes course focuses on Elder Futhark and not the other ones. But that was, I believe, a book 4 reference, maybe a book 5. So it's possible that, like, as they get further into ancient runes, they start to delve into other runes and we're just not getting references because, like, the story's focus is really now becoming the Wizarding War and not, like, what their classes are about.
Sure.
But because that's the only one we have a canon reference to, and because frankly it's the only one I feel even halfway confident trying to describe anything about, we're going to stay within that specific set of runes, with the caveat of, like, while I may have some heritage from it, like, I certainly haven't been raised in, like, the Norse culture, and I may not get some of these pronunciations perfect, and I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to what runes are, so we'll tread lightly with this culture and try not to delve at all into the fact that, like, recently with things with, like, neo-Nazis and stuff like that, some of what the runes are supposed to mean is being changed because they're being adapted by hateful people. And so we're going to be talking about what they were really supposed to mean, not what they're being used for today by any particular hate group. So, like I was saying, there's only one canon reference, and it's Harry's talking to Hermione about the end of year exams, and she's upset because she says that she mixed up Iwas and Ewas, which implies that they're working with written translations, not working with, like, the picture essentially of the rune. Because so Iwas it does sound pretty similar to Awas. However, the runic shapes are extremely different. So Iwas is kind of like if you were drawing an S that was, like, styled after a Z but is an S, and then, like, turned it slightly, so almost like a tilted backwards N, whereas Ewas is like an M. So, like, if you were doing translations for a test and you had those two things, it would be odd that those would be the two that you would mix up. It would make more sense if you were mixing it up based off of the shape of the rune, that you would mix up Iwas and Sowelo, because Iwas, again, is sort of like a reverse Z. So, like, if it were an S but, like, had the very sharp shape of a Z tilted slightly, whereas Sowelo is like an S that is styled after a Z but is straight up and down. So those two are very similar. But then it's also really interesting because they all have very different meanings. So Iwas means you. And then it also, like, if you're like reading runes and reading different interpretations into it, can mean like initiation, death, mysterious, immortality, things like that. Whereas Ewas means horse and can mean trust, teamwork, love, emotion. So like they're very different. And so when we know of Hermione as being this very studious person, it's odd that those would be the two that she mixed up. But if we're going off of the idea, we're working with the translation of the rune, then it kind of makes sense that she mixed them up because the words are very similar. Iwas and Awas are very similar.
Okay. I got you.
Yeah. Something else that I think is really interesting is that Harry Potter's scar, it kind of matches the wand movement for the Avada Kedavra spell, which is also reversed Iwas, sorry. Maybe she just mixed them up because they're hard to say and they sound very similar because I'm doing it right now. So if you read runes, any rune except for Iwas, it's the only one that this doesn't apply to. Any rune can be read straight up or it can be read reversed. So then if you pull a rune reversed, it means the opposite of what that typically would mean. So Iwas is the one exception to that rule. You cannot pull it in reverse. It can only ever fall in the one meaning. So it will always mean you, initiation, death, mysterious. That thing, it will never change.
Okay.
So it's really interesting that it kind of matches Harry Potter's scar, because even if you did it in reverse, it's still the same rune. Because the scar was given to him by a yew wand. Like the Elder Wand is made out of yew. And then also, like, one of the meanings to that rune is death. And the person that gave it to him with a yew wand was seeking immortality when he was trying to kill him, because it was all part of like making Horcruxes. So it's really, really fascinating. And like, we don't delve enough into runes in the books for me to fully buy that was an intentional choice. But what a choice.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a great choice.
Especially because we didn't, like, as the books describe it with a lightning bolt scar, we didn't initially think of it like that shape. That came about when the movies were made. And there was actually a lot of fans that were upset about how the scar was done in the movies. But the scar in the movies sort of ties all these pieces together and makes it work as a runes reference, which I just think is fascinating.
And maybe somebody picked up on that too. It's like, oh, hey.
Maybe.
The scar should look more like this.
Yeah, I think there's more evidence for that in some other movies, which we'll dig into. So kind of playing with the same idea. And now I should do a caveat too of like, when I'm saying spell movements, we're on borderline for being able to call any of that canon, right? Because in the book, it's not like there's, other than like saying a swish and a flick, like they're not describing like the shapes. So this is coming from like video games. But my understanding is the video games are considered canon, for things like that, for the larger fan base. Like the people who truly just treat the books as canon obviously will not accept them as canon, and that's fine. I'm including them because it ties in interesting pieces with the whole runic system across the series. So I'm referencing spell movements that may or may not be fully accurate, because we just don't have the source material to know. But Protego, the spell wand move it, matches for the rune of Isas, which means ice, and like stasis and focus. And so I thought that was kind of interesting because like the hardness of ice and like trying to focus a power makes sense within the shield charm. It also could work for it being like the stasis charm, right? Because we know that's a charm that works in the Harry Potter universe. But I just was like, that's really interesting. And the wand movement for Arresto Momentum to stop someone from falling is Awas, which is partially means like trust and teamwork. And typically you would be using Arresto Momentum like on someone else. So it's sort of like teamwork to stop them from falling. So I thought that was kind of cool. Defindo is another one that uses the same wand movement as Avada Kedavra, which is fascinating. I didn't realize that, but those two spells have the same movement, and it's just the incantation is different. But so like Defindo is separating two things, and like you could in theory be like ripping someone's life from them. Like, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting, and it was also using the Iwaz rune to cast it.
It seems like that would have been a good opportunity to make the movement backwards or the reverse of the other one. Like, like the alpha and the omega kind of thing. Like, to do it backwards would then fit in and tie in. It's weird that it's the same movement, but just the incantation's different. But
yeah.
I mean, if it works, right? And
it gives weight to, in the first book, Hermione's telling them, and then I think we're also referencing, like, a lesson from Flitwick of, like, how important pronunciation is, because, like, this one wizard cast the spell just slightly wrong in the pronunciation and ended up with a buffalo on his chest, and that's not what he was trying to do. But so, like, it's a great case for, like, oh, make sure you cast the spell for Defindo correctly, because if you're mumbling up your words, you might halfway kill someone. Like, it's the same wand movement.
Wow.
Or you could be trying to kill someone and, like, choke on a fly, and instead you just, like, rip their dress. Like,
I wonder sometimes if, because the spells don't work if you don't get the gesture right?
Correct.
And obviously, probably exactly the same if you don't get the incantation right. If you say there's something wrong in the incantation, maybe it doesn't function correctly.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just thinking about that, because it's like, if you got it wrong, but you could accidentally, like, do some harm, I was trying to think of how that would work, but never mind. Not important.
It's okay. So I had said earlier, like, there's other runic references in the films that maybe point to someone that was working in the films knows more about runes. It was like, oh, let's use this because it works. So Sirius Black has tattoos that are runes, and there's really nothing in the books talking about, like, oh, he had this specific rune, right? So we know it's all, like, was made by the production team for the films. Well, so he has the Onzus rune, which means God, and can also mean strong conflict and communication, a couple other things. And he also has Alges, which means elk, and vulnerable, treason, and intimate relationships. So what's really fascinating... Oh, Alges is reversed, and that's why it means that, because typically it would mean, like, loyalty. But so that's really interesting, because Sirius kind of has a god complex.
Yeah.
And then he is massively betrayed in personal relationships by Peter Pettigrew. And then he has these runes on his body.
Huh.
So I just think that's so fascinating. And, like, it's not quite the same thing because it's elk versus stag. But I thought it was interesting that he had elk, and then, like, James is his best friend, and James transforms into a stag when he shifts. It's a little bit looser there, though, right? Because it's an elk, not a stag. The rest, there's a couple other that he has. I think they might be alchemical runes, but I'm only talking about the ones in the Elder Futhark, because that's the only ones where I feel like I halfway know what I'm talking about. Right. But so there's other ones there that, like, are not Elder Futhark runes, but I think they may be alchemical runes. Also, Sirius's Azkaban ID has runes in it, which again is a movie choice. It's not described in the book, but they created the Azkaban posters for the movies, and his, like, ID as prisoner has it. And so one of them is Perthro, which means, like, luck and chance. And then also his prison ID has the Alges in it, or Alges.
Yeah.
And it's not reversed in the prison one. So at that point, then it means, like, protection and higher self. And so I just thought that was really interesting, because his runes are very positive while the image of him is very negative. And so it's, like, kind of telling you secretly that he's not a bad guy with the runes. And then you don't learn it till later in the film that he's actually not a bad guy.
Yeah. Okay.
So I like choose to believe that that's true. I don't know if that was actually like an intentional choice by the crew, or if maybe they just thought those runes looked cool. Bellatrix's ID doesn't appear to be using Elder Futhark runes at all. The first rune in her ID is very similar to Tiwa's, but it's not Tiwa's. And that one's like God and Justice. So I don't know. I just thought it, for me, with hers being like kind of like a justice thing, it read as like, yeah, she should be here. And then with Sirius's, I felt like it read like, oh, like you've been tricked. He's not a bad guy. But I might be reading a lot into that.
And then it also seems to suggest an inconsistency with the use of the runes too. You know, where this one's saying, hey, you know, what you're seeing isn't really what he is. But the other one's like, well, you know, they kind of deserve to be here. This is about justice. And I don't know. Maybe there's a, maybe that was used more for just appearance than anything else,
like
and
a
they
decorative choice. It's possible.
Or someone did it with Sirius, and then when they got the Bellatrix, it was maybe a different designer.
Yeah.
And they went, oh yeah, they had runes on that one. Well,
we gotta put
give me some
here.
cool runes. All right, here's one that looks like this. Perfect. It means turkey.
It means turkey. So Tiwa's also can mean sacrifice. So then, like, if we're trying to think they did it intentionally, would it be a reference to like, she feels like a martyr because she feels like she's one of the only ones that was willing to go to Azkaban for her god, which was Voldemort.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just very interesting. And then I went through, I couldn't find any other runes in the books. Like they talk about ancient runes being a class, but we don't get a lot of like Hermione talking about her class work. So I didn't find any more references in the books. And so far, I really haven't found other runes in the movies. But I'm like really tempted to do like a rewatch of all of them and try to just like look in frames and see if
you can find them.
Runes. Yeah.
That's sad because it could end up just being that one designer was like, hey, this is a great way to use these. Yeah. And then maybe didn't like the notes for why they did that got lost and they weren't designing on the next one. And someone went, oh, cool. Well, I'll put them on Bellatrix too. And then everyone else just forgot about them. It's like, oh, well, the runes only get used with the when they go to jail. So we don't need them anymore.
Yeah. No more runes. Yeah. So there is in an extra canon, so referenced through so this will probably be the one time that I'm just going to call her out as the author, but J.K. Rowling's personal website at one point had a reference to a series of runic numbers that she created and shared that were asked to accept as canon. They're kind of interesting, but I would argue that they're not runes. They're actually pictographs even like hieroglyphics. But I feel personally like hieroglyphics is specific to Egypt. So I tend to feel that it's more appropriate to say pictograph because obviously there's nothing Egyptian about it. Maybe I'm overthinking that one. But
it may be just that hieroglyphics became well known in Egypt, but pictographs, I believe, show up in Native American culture and stuff like that too. So maybe there is maybe the word hieroglyphic isn't like isolated to Egypt. It's just Egypt made it known.
That's possible.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But
I was trying to look up like what is it if it isn't a room? Like is it cuneiform? Is it what? And anyway, I landed on pictograph, but like basically something that is much more detailed because runes really often are like sharp lines.
Yeah.
That are very simplistic but make shapes, and those shapes like become words or letters. That's something that we didn't talk about, but like each rune is also like a letter, so then you could make words from things that are technically words. So there's 24 runes in the Elder Futhark series of runes, and each one of them is not only a word, it's also a letter. So then you could spell out different things. So I thought it might be fun, and I may do this. You know, like we always post an Instagram image, like when the episodes come out. I may do like some of the characters' names in runes or something like that as part of the image because you have all this stuff to be able to spell out words and write things. Whereas with these runic numbers, like it really wouldn't work that way. It would just be like a series of pictures and and I mean, because it's numbers, it doesn't function anyway. But like stringing them together, I don't feel like makes a different thing. It's just like, oh, there's another one of that again. But I thought I would go through them because it was kind of interesting. So she did a numbers for 0 through 9. And then obviously, I guess you could do combos of them to make like 10 and 22 and all of those numbers. But so 0 is the demiguise, and she picked that one because it's like the 0 is invisible because 0 doesn't exist, right? And I thought that was a good choice because the demiguise can turn invisible.
Right.
And then maybe I'll do like a little, have like a series of images for this post and actually put kind of like my interpretation, because I don't want to just copy something from her website, but I could do like a drawing of the different runes and put it on there. And so then 1 is unicorn because like single horn.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense.
And 2 is a grap horn because dual horns. So 2. 3 was a rune spore, which is a 3-headed snake. I was like, that's pretty cool.
That's creepy.
Yeah. 4 is a fwooper, which I found fun because we have a guest that goes by the name Fwooper. Yeah. But fwoopers have 4 different colored feathers.
Oh, okay.
And 5 is a quintuped because you guessed it, 5 legs. 6 is a salamander because what we learn through like the Care of Magical Creatures class is that the salamanders, specifically this type of salamander, lives in fire, and it can only survive for 6 hours outside of fire. And so that's why she used the salamander for number 6.
Okay.
And then 7 is just unknown. Like literally it's this weird, it almost looks like an alien head with like a couple like tendril things coming out of it, but then it translates as unknown. And the reason that she did that is because she said that 7's magically powerful and should remain shrouded in mystery. And I just thought that was such an interesting choice and would love to ask some questions.
Well, hasn't 7 also been used in like other fictions as like a power number?
Yeah, and I think that if you were to look at numerology and like the Caledonian numbers and all that, like 7 is a powerful number. And we see it in the series because like Voldemort's talking about how 7 is a powerful number and he wants to split his soul 6 times to make 7 Horcruxes, and he just screws that up and splits it 7 times and makes an 8th Horcrux on accident.
Of course. And of course, 7, 8, 9. So there's that too.
7 is very scary.
7's a power number.
Yeah. So she made it unknown because it's too powerful for us to know it. 8 is Acromantula because, come on. 8 eyes, 8 legs.
I had no idea, and now I'm terrified.
Well, Aragog.
That doesn't... Yeah, okay. No.
Yeah, I didn't say you're going to like it. I just said what it
hate
is.
It. No,
because you've seen the movie.
I'm glad 7, 8, 9. That's all. I'm glad 7, 8, all of them.
7 needs to 8.
7 needs to just eat everything.
Yeah, that's fair. And then 9 was a Hydra because Hydras have 9 heads.
Oh yeah.
Well, maybe they start with 9 heads.
No, I think there's some mythic something to that. I think that they have 9 heads, but then like
if you cut
one off, 2 more grow back. So they grow more, but I think
you could have more than 9.
I think they start with 9.
Yeah. I thought that was really interesting. That's all of the stuff that I got from deep diving on runes in the series, but I'm happy to talk about runes in general if you have rune questions.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, runes are fascinating just because in most cases I've seen them, they're usually a stone with the symbol carved into them, and in fiction and mythology they have power. I like incorporating them into things too, because they're fun, because they're interesting. I mean, you are borrowing from someone else's belief system, so you do have to be careful how you represent it, because you don't want to like shit on someone's belief system.
Yeah, or just like totally misinterpret it. So like, I really enjoy studying it because like, I got into the whole idea because I did like my ancestry DNA and saw that like I had heritage from that area, and I was like, well, I want to know more about that. So I started reading more about it, and it was really interesting because there's like a few poem books. Basically, it's like kind of like how the Odyssey is, but it's about Odin and how like the Norse got the runes.
Okay.
And like the story is that Odin sacrificed his eye so that he could gain the knowledge. And then after he went on like that spiritual journey, he returned with the runes. So it's like he gave the world the runes because he made a sacrifice.
Not to diverge too far, but didn't he gave his eye to somebody, didn't he? Or some person or something, and then that's how that all got started. I can't remember who though. It was like I remember like like they wanted his eye and he got. I only remembered again some of it. I didn't think about the runes, but yeah, I mean that was kind of like diverging a little bit. But I was just kind of curious. I was like, I think I've heard that one before.
Yeah, I don't know if I can say the name right, but Mimir. Mimir? That's who got the eye.
I think it's Mimir.
Yeah. And then part of what he got in that trade was the knowledge. And
okay.
The power that comes with the knowledge.
That's kind of cool. Norse background, Norse mythology stuff's really interesting. So
yeah. I
like seeing them try to incorporate it more and bring it into like the wizarding world. Because it makes a lot of sense that it would be present in the wizarding world and I feel like it should have power in the wizarding world. It's kind of like one of those ancient magic systems.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't feel like they really explain magic in Harry Potter too much. Like,
which is actually why I get so, like, irritated that the Harry Potter books became banned books. Because it's not teaching magic. It's just a make-believe story. So, like, what are you afraid of? Like, you know what I'm saying? But I kind of derailed you there. What were you saying?
No. That was pretty much it. And go along with your last thought. I mean, it's just the putting ideas in that they, I don't know, can't control. I mean, if you're going to run belief systems that don't require evidence and work purely on belief, then technically you could believe in anything, and then that could gain power in their mind. So maybe it has something to do with that.
Maybe
it's great when facts aren't necessary.
Alternative facts. You know, non-facts. I love it. Some might call them, you know, falsehoods. So in maybe as like a closing thing, just as like a fun little game, with the idea of like runes can be different letters. Maybe I'll spell a character name in runes. But then so that I don't make my own life difficult, let's spell Ron because that's really short. So Ron in runes would be Rideho, Othala, Nauthies. And so the meaning is like ride, homeland, need fire. And so like if we break that down further, knowledge, craft, and tradition, inheritance, estate, legacy, heaven on earth, and necessity, friction, and life lesson.
Well, I definitely see the friction with Ron.
He's got that. And he's got the, like,
legacy
homeland,
too.
Inheritance kind of stuff, like, with his family. Like,
family has a big legacy.
He has an inheritance of, like, pure blood magic, which is, like, prized in the wizarding community. Sure. And I think there is a certain nobility to Ron. I just realized when I told you Rido, I said knowledge, craft, and tradition, and it is journey, nobility, and righteousness, and I transposed lines of what I had written down. So, let me...
That's okay.
I'm an idiot.
That's okay.
But, like, he definitely goes on a journey, and I think there is a certain nobility to Ron. I actually think we see it most strongly in Book 1, and there's certainly a righteousness to Ron.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of interesting. That makes me kind of want to do Harry. So Harry would be Hagalaz, Ansus, Rido, and Yara. So we'll skip Rido because we just did that for Ron. Hagalaz is hail. And then Ansus is God. We were talking about that earlier. And Yera is year. So then, like, when we break that down further, for things that we would be associating with Harry, we would be saying harvest, cycles, time, right effort, order, breath, communication, journey, nobility, righteousness. I don't know how I feel about that.
I struggle with the communication part.
Yeah, I actually feel like he's not a good communicator at all. Oh, but it also, because of Hagalaz, is catastrophe, radical change, and opportunity. That maybe Harry just only identifies with the first letter of his name.
He is an instrument for change.
And a lot of his life is catastrophe after catastrophe after catastrophe.
And he seems to have his, when he needs to communicate the most, he's able to do it.
Yeah.
You know, when he needs to the most, and it's the most important, his darkest hour, if you will, he finds a way to communicate. Maybe it's not like just with words, but his actions, because his actions usually do go a long, long ways. Especially like some of the things he does, like in book 1, and like with the stone and the mirror of Erised.
Yeah.
And like then the basilisk, and then
I would argue he's a bad communicator all throughout book 2.
Well, that's what I mean. Like where he fails with words, he succeeds with actions.
Oh,
maybe?
Yeah. Sorry, I like lost the plot on what we were saying.
That is easy to do with me because I derail us so quickly. But you know, maybe that's where the communication could come in. You know, we're sort of thinking the traditional meaning and think, oh, well, there's other ways. You know, you can communicate with your actions. You know.
Yeah.
Do as I do, not as I say, kind of a thing. You know.
Yeah.
He definitely can't sway anybody with his words.
At least, definitely when he's younger. He gets better, like, around late book 5.
I feel like someone's sitting somewhere, thumbing through books, writing down examples. He can so communicate.
Maybe. It's possible. But, hey, comment about it on our Instagram.
Do it.
Do it.
Or comment anything, really. I mean, if you want to, like, just say anything to us, you know. Totally we'll respond probably really quick. Because you'll be one of our 2 fans who talk to us. So, hey, we'll respond really fast.
And on that note, thanks for tuning in, Muggles. If you're jonesing for more witchy goodness between episodes, you can check us out on Instagram at Dusty Cauldron Podcast, on Facebook at the Dusty Cauldron Podcast group, or email us at dustycauldronpodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out our website, www.dustycauldronpodcast.com. You can subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening. And if you want to hear more, subscribing is definitely a good idea.
Always.
And remember, runes are awesome, and they actually were used in a kind of unique and fun way in the Harry Potter series. So next time you're doing a watch through of the movies, keep your eyes out for anywhere so that you might be able to find them.
Yeah, tell us where we didn't see them. You might see more.
And don't forget to stir whatever you've got brewing in your cauldron. Bye.
Bye.